It's hard to be bullish on much in Europe these days. The government bonds of Ireland, Portugal, and Greece have all been downgraded to junk. The Europeans have been sent back to the drawing board by the markets on their new bailout regimen. And now the markets are talking about Italy being the next country to suffer a default. It's easy to see why. Next to Greece, Italy has the highest debt in Europe at about 120% of GDP. Its government is, shall we say, eccentric. And it has the highest debt relative to GDP of any country in the world with the exception of course, Greece and Japan. The sheer size of that debt, some 2 trillion euro, is larger than the combined government debts of the 3 states that are currently in receivership combined. In fact, it's more than double the total envisioned amount of the bailout fund in its grandest incarnation. Italy certainly deserves to be under the microscope, but Stratfor does not see it as ripe for a bailout. Unlike Ireland or Portugal or Greece, Italy has a strong and large banking system, or at least healthy as compared to, say, Ireland. So while Italy's debt load is 120% of GDP, only 50% of GDP needs to be handled by outside investors. The banks handle everything else. But let's keep such optimism in context. It's now been 16 months since the first bailout of Greece back in March of last year, and it's becoming ever more apparent that the fear isn't so much that contagion from the weak states will infect the strong ones, but there are just a lot more weak states out there than anybody gave the Europeans credit for when this all started. So long as there is no federal entity with the political and fiscal capacity of dealing with the crisis, this is just going to get worse. And it's only a matter of months before what we think of as real states, such as Belgium, Austria, and Spain, are going to be starting to flirt with conservatorship themselves. Ad hoc crisis management has dealt with the small peripheral economies, but it's not capable of dealing with the problem that is now looming: potential financial instability in multi-trillion euro economies. With the illusions of stability that have sustained the euro to this point being peeled away one by one with every revelation of new debt improprieties, it's only a matter of time before the euro collapses. That is, of course, unless one of 3 things happens. Option 1 is for the stronger nations to just directly subsidize the weaker nations, basically having the North transfer wealth in large amounts to the South year after year after year. Conservatively, that's €1 trillion a year, and it's difficult to see how that would be politically palatable in a place like Germany. Option 2 is to create something called Eurobonds. Right now, the markets are scared of anything that has the word Portugal or Greece attached, and Greek debt is currently selling for about 16% versus the 3% of Germany. Eurobonds would allow European states to issue debt as a collective, so the full faith and credit of the European Union would back up any debt, which means that this 13% premium on Greek debt would largely disappear overnight. Of course, that would mean that the European whole would be ultimately responsible for those debts at the end of the day, which means after a few years we'd be back in the same situation we are right now, with the debt ultimately landing on Germany's doorstep once again. In Stratfor's view, the only difference between direct subsidization and the Eurobond plan would be when the Germans pay, now or later. The third and final option is to simply print currency to buy up the government debt directly, either via the ECB or with the ECB granting a loan to the bailout fund to purchase the debt itself. This is an option that the Europeans are sliding towards because it puts off the hard decisions on political and economic power to another day. However, it comes at a cost: inflation. Printing currency is a seriously inflationary business, and for Europe this would put them in a double bind. Europe already has to import most of its energy, it already has a rapidly aging labor force, and it already has very little free land upon which to build. Combined, this already makes the European Union the most inflationary of the world's major developed economies. And that's before you figure in printing currency.